Hello, my name is Christine Park, and my presentation is about heroes, alter egos, and personal lives. To elaborate, I will be analyzing how comics develop heroes to create a bond between the reader and the character through the use of dialogue and text. By humanizing and integrating different traits that parallel those of the average person, the reader is more likely to form an emotional bond to an otherwise distant hero. When one thinks of a classic superhero, one often thinks of dynamic personalities, flashy costumes, action, and a sense of admiration. But in contrast, when one thinks of an average person, or rather the depiction of an average person, one often associates them with a dullness, plainness, and a different kind of interactions with others, in the sense that they seem to fade into the background with all of the less dynamic characters. As for the general backstory of the character that is well known by the public as Spider-Man, Peter Parker, his alter ego, was once a normal yet gifted high school student. He was orphaned but raised by his Uncle Ben and Aunt May, and he was very intelligent when it came to academics, however more shy in social situations. This only changed when he was accidentally bitten by that radioactive spider that gave him his Spidey powers. Although the focus of this presentation is on dialogue and text, this image stood out to me because the distinction between Peter and Spider-Man is illustrated very clearly through the use of parallel panels, which is emphasized by the fact that the image on the right is larger with a busier background, as well as a depiction of his flashy costume opposed to the smaller and more plainly colored image on the left. Here, Spider-Man is about to fight a villain, and the dialogue is very interesting in the sense that he uses humor to approach the situation, which establishes a sense of confidence and the dynamic personality that is commonly associated with heroes, as referenced previously. Additionally, establishing a sense of humor is effective in creating a bond between the reader and hero, or better put, a sense of affection. Once again, in the top panel, Spider-Man uses humor to address a rather serious situation. However, in the rest of the panel, as well as the majority of the action scenes, there is very little verbal dialogue, but a lot of instances where his thoughts are on display. This in turn creates a distinction between when he's in hero mode versus when he's his normal self, which refers to the distinction between action and casual interaction. Up to this point, Spider-Man is depicted as a typical superhero. However, in the following panels, the more relatable side of Peter Parker is revealed. Here, Steve has his arms on his hips and is standing over Peter, while Peter is in a comfortable yet vulnerable stance. His question to Peter has a friendly and accusatory tone in the sense that he knows that Peter doesn't like his gift. Yet Peter's response in opposition to his thoughts portray him as an overly friendly and even passive figure. In this scene, MJ is pleasantly surprised by something that she thinks that Peter has gotten her. Yet Peter's humble response makes him relatable to the majority of readers. It is easier for the audience to relate to a person unable to afford outrageous luxuries than a man with special powers or luxurious riches. Here, Peter seems to be more like what one would consider the little guy rather than the powerful hero we're used to seeing. The dialogue in the top panels on this page portray Peter as an exceptionally kind person. Having a young man interact with elderly people establishes a sense of honor and respect that is very admirable. So at this point, Peter crosses over into the realm of an honorable person opposed to a typical normal person. So he is not only a relatable figure, but a figure that one can look up to. Peter's interaction with his grandmother is also very sweet in the sense that he speaks to her with a very loving tone, opposed to the cynical and humorous one he uses to address enemies and foes. The heart icon further supports the strong familial bond they share. This allows the audience to further form an emotional bond with Peter rather than solely viewing him as a crime fighter. With an emotional bond established, the next scene on this slide becomes more impactful. We see Peter and Aunt May talking about a character named Nathan. The dialogue between them, conflicting on what to do next, shows the weight of the situation and reminds the audience that much like normal people, he too experiences difficult situations and times where there is not much he can do, opposed to other situations where he seems to dominate the scene. The top panels on this page show that Peter is sad and possibly embarrassed after losing a fight as Spider-Man. The numerous thought and text bubbles contribute to the idea that he is lost in thought, lingering on his loss, ashamed to tell his loved one, and in need of time to cope. He's also worried about having someone he cares about worry for him, much like how we are when we experience loss in any degree. Not only do we sympathize and relate to how he feels, but we readers wish him some sort of relief. After using text to illustrate a sad state of mind, in this instance he comes home to awaiting MJ. The dialogue they share here contrasts to his thoughts because they are full of love and support, which concludes with him thinking to himself that he will always be the winner with love on his side, strengthening the moral and emotional bond we feel to him. The next series of scenes uses MJ as a device in humanizing Spider-Man as well as gaining sympathy for the hero. Initially, the dialogue between MJ and the woman seems a bit ambiguous, but as you keep reading, you discover that MJ and Peter have lost their child. All of this dialogue is crammed into the top panels, with the majority of the page being occupied by a wordless depiction of a tearful MJ, which emphasizes the emotional weight of the situation. This page takes time to appeal to morals. Through the dialogue shared between MJ and Anna, it becomes clear that, like Peter, MJ is strong in her own way too. The previous page showed that she is obviously in pain and in need of closure. However, she also states that she wants to be strong without having to call and depend on her husband, differentiating her from the classic damsel in distress that makes women seem more dependent on their male counterparts. After the reader is led to an understanding that MJ and Peter are both strong, they are brought together to share a moment. There is little dialogue on this page, however the images depicted serve as a significant complement to what is being said. With MJ's upright posture and Peter's loving embrace, they appear to be more like equals. The dialogue that completes the page further emphasizes that they are not only equals, but that they are on the same page. On the top of this page, the following panels then seem to put Peter Parker in more of the position of a caretaker, with MJ asking for permission to move, and his response being that they could do whatever she wanted. This puts Peter in the role of a doting husband, and thus far we have seen the heroic side of Spider-Man, the normal, friendly, and almost passive side of Peter Parker, and the loving nephew as well as the loving spouse. The next scene depicts Peter and MJ like the classic husband and wife spending a morning in bed together. MJ stopping Peter when he gets to his suit, and Peter's awkward and caught-off-guard response is slightly humorous. It makes Peter almost seem like a child about to get scolded, which further breaks down the built-up idea of an indestructible hero and makes him seem more vulnerable. The final scene does not have any dialogue. However, I included this slide because it serves to emphasize the emotional implications of the scene. Although I have elaborated on the use of dialogue and text, it is also important to analyze the significance of the absence of dialogue. This panel is the bleed, which adds to a sense of timelessness, and by having the characters embracing while he is in costume, seals the idea that Spider-Man and Peter are not mutually exclusive entities, but that they are truly one. Which leads to the conclusion that anyone could be a superhero. In other words, that superheroes are humans too, in several but not all cases, of course. To elaborate on this idea, the similarities that people draw from the lives of heroes in themselves make people feel as if they could be heroes. They also instill a sense of hope in people that heroes can be anywhere and anyone.